All right, man. I don't want to be talking about this any more than you guys want to be hearing this. And yet, drama has entered our lives when it comes to the Texans, above and beyond just whether or not the Texans were going to take a quarterback number 2 overall. And I didn't want to believe this, but now the voices are getting louder and people are jumping in. It started yesterday, really in earnest, when Michael Lombardi had said on his podcast that there was a chance that Nick Caserio, there might be a shuffle up or a change up somehow in the organization in Houston. And this was after it seemed like, man, Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans had been walking in lockstep. It was a damn Shangri-La when it came to good vibes and everything. But I'll play a little portion of that. I know you guys have all seen all of this, and Michael Lombardi is going to be on our show tomorrow morning. So Lombardi doesn't just throw stuff out there as clickbait or anything. He says what he knows to be true or what he's been hearing. Now, people can hear things that aren't necessarily accurate or whatever, but I trust Michael Lombardi when it comes to that. I might differ with him in opinion on various things, but I do believe that he speaks the truth about stuff like this. He's kind of clued me in on stuff before that ended up happening where he wasn't reporting anything. He just told me like, hey, this is what I'm hearing. And there was merit to it. But, and as Andy Pittman says, if he's gone, he wants out, plain and simple. Yeah, we'll get into that in a little bit. But just to frame everything up, here's Lombardi from yesterday or 2 days ago, just talking about the scenario that we've learned might be unfolding.
I think there'll be some organizational changes in Houston after the draft. I believe that. I think there's going to be some way. I'm not saying that people are going to get fired, but I think there's organizational the way they shifted things down there. So getting the 6-year deal, the long play. One thing you know about if you're D'Amico Ryans is you ain't getting fired after a year.
No.
Right? So
I mean, that'd be a lot of money to just be chilling.
Why not go 1-15?
Yeah.
Why not get the better quarterback? Why not rebuild the team, do exactly what Kyle Shanahan did in San Francisco, start slow and go from there?
Okay. I don't want to get into any of that. I don't feel like starting slow and going from there. We've been in slow motion for 3 years now. So, I mean, that's a whole nother separate topic. But, when we first had heard this, we thought, okay, well, what's that mean? That could mean maybe D'Amico gets more power or what have you. Just, it could mean any number of things. And then yesterday, out of nowhere, our guy, John McLean, came on the morning show with Payne and Pendergast and dropped this little nugget on us. Let me put it in this way since there we go.
Well, I have no idea because...
And we had asked John just about this nugget we'd heard from Michael Lombardi, who, by the way, has worked with Nick Caserio, worked with Bill O'Brien, was in New England forever, has known Belichick forever in both Cleveland and New England.
Nick Caserio is the general manager. I had somebody tell me at the combine that they heard Caserio is going to go back to New England after the draft, and I said, so he's going to walk away from a $5 million contract after 2 years on the job after he's put in all that work. And this guy said, it's just something I heard, but I have no idea. If any of that's true, I can't imagine Caserio would be leaving, knowing how happy the McNairs are with him right now and how well he works with D'Amico Ryans and how D'Amico was his recommendation. The McNairs signed off on it. They like D'Amico as well. And right when they have everything, gosh, as good as they've had it and how long, going back to the 2018 off season when nobody'd been traded and the controversy hadn't begun until another year when Bill O'Brien traded DeAndre Hopkins, and it seemed to be nonstop controversy. 19's when Jack Easterby was hired. I can't imagine the Texans being in better situation. As far as somebody in the front office, James Lipford is the head of the personnel, but he doesn't have the title of the head of personnel. So Mike worked with Caserio and Lipford for several years in New England. And so I don't know what he's talking about, but I can't imagine what it would be.
Yeah, so again, like, and McLean would go on, I'll play some of the clips from this. as far as, why would he step away from that? I mean, there could be multiple reasons he might be unhappy, just in that I think that Caserio did step into a situation that he didn't realize just how complex or perhaps dysfunctional it was. And there were probably a lot of surprises to him. I would say that, that I think that's common in a lot of jobs, though. Sometimes you take on the job to fix the problems that maybe you don't even know about, and you have to be ready for that. It seems like, to me, Caserio has been genuinely happy working with D'Amico Ryans and genuinely impressed by D'Amico Ryans. Nick doesn't really have he doesn't really have a BS gene in terms of, I know he can talk a blue streak and kind of talk a lot without actually directly answering a question, but a lot of times that's, GM speak, not necessarily feeding somebody a line, but he'll talk in circles out of necessity at times. John did end up, kind of clarifying things on our website yesterday. McLean makes no sense for Caserio to leave the Texans after the draft. Before I go into speculation that general manager Nick Caserio could be leaving the Texans after the draft, something I believe is preposterous, let me point out a few things. Caserio loves D'Amico Ryans and recommended him to Cal and Hannah McNair. Caserio still has final say on every personnel decision going into the draft. Anybody who believes anything different is clueless about the way the Texans operate. So there's that. And I think, let's see, let's address the Caserio speculation, which I heard for the first time at the NFL meetings in Phoenix last month. Then he goes on to explain the situation that the person had floated to him. I checked with people in the Texans organization I trust. They said they didn't believe it either. These are just a few choice phrases from John's article. Why would Caserio this is okay. I can't do my John McClain impression too much. Why would Caserio want to return to the Patriots after trying to leave them 3 times to become a general manager? I think the answer to that really would be, aside from any maybe discontent he has here, it would be that would it surprise anybody if Belichick retires after a year or two, and that Caserio, who I'm guessing had long felt like second fiddle clearly to Bill Belichick, and like when you're second fiddle to Bill Belichick, that's not even that's like still like in the room behind the orchestra. You're not actually playing in the symphony at that point. Bob Kraft has long been reported to really like Caserio. He had tasked Caserio with projects like basically trying to figure out how to keep this thing going after Belichick is gone. So whatever the Texans are paying Nick Caserio, I wouldn't be surprised if Bob Kraft had something pretty lucrative in mind for Caserio too. Now, we get into tampering, we get into whether this is, if this is true at all, if perhaps Caserio and McNair, have had some kind of mutual agreement or potential parting of the ways there. There's a lot of ifs, ands, or buts. But, oh, by the way, he'd have to take orders from Belichick again rather than have final say on all personnel decisions. Yeah, and that's just the question is, would it be temporary or not? And, of course, there's this little matter about no opening in New England because Bill Belichick is the czar who controls everything. Caserio tried to come to the Texans 3 times beginning in 2017. So that is all true. I don't think that it necessarily precludes any of this from actually being true. It's just a matter of like, why now? Why would they wait until after the draft? There's precedent for that. The best draft that the Texans ever had was in 2006 when Casterly knew that he was going to be stepping down after the draft. Kubiak had been hired, and it was clear that Casterly and the McNairs weren't seeing eye to eye, but he stayed and stuck it out and through the draft. And like, this is usually what happens after the draft. That's when you fire your scouts and everybody, because whether they know they're going to get fired beforehand or not, because they've been working with the team on this project, the draft. And it gets dicey because you got to just trust that your guys are going to be ethical and not hurt you at all until after the draft. So I don't know. That part of it doesn't rule it out. The oddity of Caserio going into and conducting the draft and then leaving for the Patriots. It would obviously be a weird situation, but it wouldn't be unprecedented. It would just be uncomfortable, I think. This is Mike Florio, just to catch everything else up on it. McLean doesn't buy it, but he notes that the former NFL executive Michael Lombardi has recently said there will be organizational changes after the draft. That's not a surprise. Now, this is interesting. Given that executive VP of football operations Jack Easterby was fired during the 2022 season, has not yet been replaced. It's the Easterby departure, which, by the way, okay, Easterby hasn't been replaced. Nobody has an Easterby in their organization. So there's nothing to replace. Like, Easterby had carved out a unique role in football for himself. So there doesn't need to be a replacement for Easterby. My God. It's the Easterby departure that could be a factor for Caserio, since it was Easterby who persuaded owner Cal McNair to go off the board, as it was fashioned by the search firm, and hire Caserio. Yes, we all remember that. After the team had made a failed effort to hire him away from the Patriots. And then they go back into that same scenario of the Texans after Dom Capers was fired. So two more people weighing in on the current situation, including Michael Silver, who honestly, long time respected NFL journalist, but also it's felt like he's had a little bit of an axe to grind versus the Texans as of late. But he says to further flesh out the rumor, the talk is that 49ers assistant GM Adam Peters would be targeted to replace Caserio. I'll be honest with you, I know zero about assistant general manager Adam Peters, other than that obviously he comes from San Francisco. This would totally make us San Francisco East, what were we saying? Niners Gulf Coast. This would be Niners Gulf Coast instead of Patriots South, which is a shift in some ways. I would say a welcome shift or change until it doesn't work out. We'll be happy with this arrangement, and if and until it doesn't work out. But then there's also, again, Michael Lombardi, who's going to be on our show tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Central. So tune into Payne and Pendergast tomorrow morning. We're going to get Michael Lombardi to expound on this a lot more. But on his podcast, the GM Shuffle today, he did talk about it a little bit more.
A lot of dynamics going on in Houston. I think D'Amico Ryans has a lot more say in the draft than probably other coaches, David Culley or Lovie Smith. I think he's kind of got his blueprint in there. It's different than Nick's blueprint because, remember, Nick has hired two coaches, as Nick Caserio. He's hired two coaches that really don't – he's hired three coaches that don't fit his profile of what he has been accustomed to, right? So when you're in New England, edge rushers are not – they're in demand. Chandler Jones, they drafted, but they have to play within the framework. Whereas I think if you look at what he did in San Francisco, he knows the value of a defensive line.
Yeah, and that is a big difference. The thing about the Patriots is they've drafted guys in the first round, but the one thing about the Patriots is that so many of their draft picks have been late first round picks. They've rarely drafted in the top half of the first round, and it's been when they were they traded up to get it. Chandler Jones was a 21st overall selection. So not the same as going up and drafting a cornerback, but it's long been thought that Belichick values cornerbacks, the ability to play man coverage, more than he does pass rushers. Chandler Jones, remember, they traded away for a second-round pick. I know he had an incident where he's basically up in Debo's chicken coop in Boston there, but that's never kept the Patriots from keeping guys around before with issues, potentially. So I think that there's something to that. Perhaps I'm not 100% sure that would be it, unless there was something where, I've seen one report, Matt Miller today from ESPN, said that he thought that the Texans really like Anderson, the pass rusher out of Alabama, whereas some people think that D'Amico really likes Tyree Wilson. Now, how much of that is speculation? I could personally, without actually getting fed this from anybody, I had thought that D'Amico liked Tyree Wilson. I've since then heard from from somebody I trust that might be true as well. Please don't take that as a report or anything. Like I hate all this might and could be and stuff and everything. Suffice it to say, I think there could be a difference in perhaps who they like as an edge rusher. But again, those are disagreements that happen. And certainly I couldn't see some kind of impasse this early into the working relationship that became an issue. A couple of you guys have made some good points here. Jack Wood says smoke 2 weeks before the draft, and everyone is not talking quarterback. That's potentially, maybe. I think, and you also never know, too, if maybe Caserio just, if somebody asks, maybe somebody asks Caserio, hey, do you miss the Northeast? Caserio says yes. And all of a sudden, that guy's like, Caserio sure sounds depressed. And don't you know, I heard that the Houston Texans aren't that great an organization. Texans are still paying the consequences of some of the stupid stuff that happened over the last few years. I do feel like sometimes people hear about anything happening in Houston and they feel like, well, it makes sense because people probably want to get the hell out of here. I haven't yet, unless something happened that I don't know about, and maybe you guys have. I haven't heard anybody shut it down. Caserio will speak to the media early next week. But I remember one time there was a rumor about Rick Smith getting fired after the season. Remember? And it was Cal McNair or Bob McNair, like within 48 hours, issued a clarification that Rick Smith wasn't going to get fired. That was during the season. Now, that also may have been Rick Smith, who was pretty good at the political side of things. That might have been Rick Smith maybe asking the owner to get out in front of something like that. Who knows? But for whatever it's worth, there hasn't been an outright denial of this. Dark Matter brought this up, and I thought it was a good point. As far as John McClain saying, why would he want to go work for Belichick when he tried to get out of that situation before? For one, when he was trying to get out of that situation, it was with a pretty nice paycheck. But also, too, I think the timeline on when Belichick might retire was a lot longer, and maybe it's a little bit closer now. I don't know. But he would be joining B.O.B., who he wanted to be with here. At one point, that was going to be the setup. It was going to be Bill O'Brien, Jack Easterby, and Nick Caserio. Unless Bob Kraft has changed his mind about Jack Easterby, I don't think Jack Easterby is going back to New England. As I understand it, Bill O'Brien would have to have changed his mind about Easterby too. So I don't think that's going to happen. Naughty Doodle says, I just can't see it. Doesn't make sense. He's under contract and making a lot of money. Yeah, the biggest thing I wonder is, okay, is he genuinely unhappy with his situation and why? And the only thing that I could think that might be reasonable is if maybe they don't want to take a quarterback, or maybe they don't like the quarterbacks. Maybe Bobby Slowick either really likes CJ Stroud or really hates CJ Stroud. And Nick Caserio either does or does not want to take the quarterback. So if there's some kind of disagreement about taking that quarterback, it puts Caserio in a position where he's not going to get any benefit of the doubt. Like, I think Caserio would be able to read the room and say, all right, well, D'Amico sure is popular, and he sure is first year on the job, and the Texans sure as hell better not be thinking about firing a head coach anytime soon, especially D'Amico Ryans, even if it's a bad year this year. That if they don't draft the quarterback and the Texans are bad next year, Caserio wouldn't survive that. And likewise, if they do draft the quarterback and he's no good, Caserio wouldn't survive that. So if there's a disagreement between Slowick and D'Amico and Caserio, maybe it is a matter of just feeling like, okay, this isn't going to work out. But I feel dirty even talking about this many contingencies. Let's take a look, and let's just remember, when I've seen some people say that, well, Caserio wasn't involved in the hiring process. This is from people outside of Houston. Let's remember exactly what it was like at the opening press conference.
So when we interviewed D'Amico, it was interesting. So it was
Tell me if you can
Friday
hear this.
After they just finished practice. He literally walked off the practice field probably 30 minutes before he sat with us, right? And they were getting ready to play the Cowboys in the divisional round. You would have never known that. His passion, I mean, what was in, like, what do we like? Like, everything. Like, it was one of the more impressive interactions that I've been around. And the thing about it is genuine. Like, D'Amico is who he is. He's sincere. He's real. And by the end of the call, we kind of had some parting words. Do you have anything else you want to leave with us? And he said, like, basically, I want to come home. This is my dream job. Let's make it happen. All right. So I think it behooves us to kind of take that information and say, all right, let's figure out a way. Now, understanding the rules and parameters in place, like they were playing, whatever it was Sunday, we couldn't talk to them basically until, now they won the game. I mean, fortunately they won. I mean, they beat the Cowboys. Everybody in Houston was happy about that. So we couldn't talk to them basically for another week because they were preparing for the NFC Championship game. So I think part of the process was being patient and just understanding that this is a real dude right here, and it's an impressive discussion, interaction, and we just had to be patient. We still had to go through our process, be diligent, but all the things that we felt were important for this job that a head coach needs to possess. Before we went into this, we kind of had 8 to 10 different characteristics or traits or criteria that are important, and there's so many things that go into being a great head coach. And part of it is going to be learned along the way, but we talk about leadership, you talk about strategy, you talk about tactician, you talk the ability to connect and lead people. You start to put all those things together, and we got off the call. I mean, we all kind of looked at each other like, holy cow, like, let's go play football tomorrow. But it wasn't a facade. It was just, that's who D'Amico is as a person and a man. And I think that resonated with us. And we kind of had to wait, had to be patient, and kind of wait our turn. But in the end, like, all signs led back to D'Amico, which is why we're sitting in this room with everybody here today.
Look, and so I tend to be kind of skeptical and cynical about things. Like, especially when people are speaking publicly in a football context, because people are going to say the right things. Like, I can't watch that and think for a moment that Caserio wasn't genuinely all in on D'Amico Ryans. I mean, we'd never really seen Nick Caserio animated that way or talking that way. And I think he might have gone into this offseason with a certain amount of trepidation. He had that real awkward press conference right after Lovie Smith had been fired. And I think, yeah, it's very possible. And maybe he had conversations with people in New England or elsewhere around that time. And by the time guys get to the combine or owners meetings, some of those conversations get rehashed over beers or whatever with other people. The only thing that's really concerning me right now is the lack of a denial. And I don't know, maybe the Texans are in a spot right now where they're just kind of like, what, there's going to be chatter. We'll just let them have it. We don't need it. As long as it's not affecting us, as long as Nick Caserio and D'Amico Ryans feel like they're on the same page, then we're cool. I had allowed myself to be lulled into like freaking yeah, this is it, man. We got the guys like Caserio and D'Amico are going to see things the same way and be on the same page, and they'll have their disagreements, but they're good dudes. And it would be really hard for me right now to have to like start over and learn some new guy just as a pure Texans fan, because I wanted to believe in these two. And I still, barring any more information, and I'm very interested in talking to Michael Lombardi tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. on 610 a.m. We'll have Michael Lombardi, who, has been the fuel of a lot of this, and I don't think who speaks casually or out of turn when it comes to just, recounting things that he's heard. I don't think he's going to give us every single little detail or tell us who named names or who told them that CJ Stroud might be difficult to coach, but it should be interesting. You guys had some other really good points. I'm going to get going right now, and we will hopefully revisit this a little bit later, maybe when there's a little bit more news from the day. Oh, one more thing. Magnificent Merker said a defensive lineman won't get fans in the seats unless it's J.J. Watt. I assume you're talking about the draft pick and not me personally, although I would agree with you that I'm not going to put fans in the seats at this moment. But I think that you have to remember, too, that a bad quarterback also won't long-term put fans in the seats. So that's the one side of this, is that philosophically, I totally get and understand why, if you don't feel like that quarterback is the guy, in his podcast, Michael Lombardi said, okay, what if you got the same grade on him as Kenny Pickett? Does that mean you should draft Kenny Pickett number 2 overall? No, but I don't think that they have the same grade on CJ Stroud as they do on Kenny Pickett. But that is the big X factor is, okay, do they feel that any of these guys is the guy that they should be drafting, or should they hold out for a little bit longer and roll the dice that they're going to find their guy? That's the $1 million question. And I just, I hope we get a denial sometime soon. I want to go into this draft and just worry about the draft and not any of the other, like, this is extraneous drama. We've been extraneous drama free for what? 2 months, 3 months? Feels like the Pax Romana up in here with the lack of extraneous drama. And now we have extraneous drama. Snuff it out, Cal. I implore you.